Helmut the snowman. Lisa loved winter and everything that comes with it. She loved snow and ice, sledding, hot cocoa, and snowball fights. But most of all, she loved building snowmen. Every winter, she waited for enough snow to fall so she could finally start building outside. Sometimes she would lose track of time, and her parents would worry because she was still sitting by her snowman hours later, making tiny little improvements. Occasionally, she even gave the snowman her own hat and gloves, continuing to work with bright red hands, forgetting that it was actually far too cold for that. One day, long after it had grown dark and her parents were about to call her inside, she was working on a very special snowman. She had placed an old hat on his head and tucked an old pipe into his mouth. He even had a scarf made of old fabric and one of her father's old neckties. She named him Helmut. And while shaping his face and adding ever finer details, she told him just how much she wished that he could answer her. When finally she was finished and collapsed exhaustedly into the snow, she saw something strange. Up in the sky, a star seemed to move, glowing brighter and brighter. A falling star. She had heard that if you make a deep wish upon a falling star, that wish must come true. Suddenly, she heard her father's voice sounding quite impatient, so she headed back into the house. The next day, she ran out of the house excitedly to continue working on Helmut. But when she reached his spot, Helmut was gone. Had one of the neighbor children destroyed him? Sometimes they made fun of how intensely Lisa worked on her snowman and had laughed at her. But they weren't really mean, and they never had destroyed one of her snowmen before. She trudged sadly through the snow. When she reached the edge of her garden, she noticed a trail in the snow, leading through the garden gate. Something had passed through here last night, but it didn't look like human footprints. It was more like a continuous track, as if something had slid across the snow. Very curious, she followed the trail out of the garden and down the street. It was Sunday and very early, so hardly anyone was out. Finally, she heard noises behind a large fence. She approached slowly and peeked through a small hole in the fence. She could hardly believe it. There stood Helmut the snowman, complete with his hat and tie, moving slowly through the snow. Her wish had come true, and Helmut had actually come to life. But where was he going? "Helmut," she called out. "Where are you going?" "Oh," said Helmut, "I am so terribly cold. I am looking for a blanket or maybe a warm fire to warm me up." "But then you would," Lisa began before catching herself and leaving the sentence unfinished. "I can bring you a blanket. Come with me," she continued. When they arrived back in Lisa's garden and she wrapped the blanket around his neck, Helmut's mood seemed to improve significantly. They talked, and Helmut wanted to know everything about Lisa's world, which he had only just entered. He was particularly interested in the seasons, as Lisa constantly raved about winter and how wonderful it was. Helmut, however, found spring much more exciting. And when he heard about the colorful flowers that began to bloom then, he desperately wanted to see them. Together, they had a lot of fun throughout the winter. They built a hut out of snow where Helmut spent the nights. And every evening, before she went back into the house, Lisa had to tell him more about colorful flowers and sunshine. She spoke of the many bright colors that existed in spring, and Helmut, who only knew the white world of winter, marveled and tried to imagine what a world without snow might look like. Finally, however, winter came to an end, and the snow began to melt slowly away. But Helmut grew more excited every day for the flowers he would soon see and the sun that was supposed to warm him. Together, they had already discovered small, delicate plants. Lisa explained they were beautiful snowdrops, but except for their green stems, they were just as white as the snow he knew so well. But Lisa had promised him colorful flowers. Would they ever arrive? Finally, on a very sunny and exceptionally warm spring day, winter had only just ended, and Helmut had hardly slept from anticipation, they went looking for flowers together. They walked to the large meadow in the valley, and the sun warmed them both, as it seemed to climb higher and higher. In the valley, Helmut could hardly believe his eyes. Colorful flowers. In every direction he looked, yellow daffodils, purple crocuses, blue primroses, and a few snowdrops in between. He sat down in the middle of the meadow and basked in the sun. "Oh, thank you, Lisa," he whispered. "I have never been as happy as I am in this moment. And finally, I am warm," he whispered even more softly. Lisa, however, had tears running down her cheeks as she nodded in agreement. "You're right," she said. "Maybe the other seasons are very beautiful too, but winter will always be my favorite. And it will always be the most beautiful to me. I will never forget you, Helmut." That evening, Lisa walked home alone, carrying a hat and a tie and a pipe, and beside her only a wet patch in the grass remained.